Hi, welcome back to the channel. Today's video is welcome back to the channel. Today's video is for anyone who plans on getting older and doesn't have a crystal ball and doesn't already have huge piles of money just waiting to be spent on whatever may come. I spent a lot of time thinking about and researching long-term care because I have had a few relatives and several people I go to church with who have needed long-term care for various reasons. Some the more expensive memory care and some less expensive, just kind of general assistance with mobility and things. And some had long-term care insurance policies and some did not. And so I started to think about how beneficial it really was to have a long-term care policy and whether it's time that I get one for myself. I think of this topic not as like the elephant in the room, but maybe like a rabid raccoon hiding in the corner. Because we don't know whether we'll need long-term care. It's not the sort of thing that I look at statistics and try to beat the odds with. Is that if I need long-term care, do I want high quality long-term care? And how am I going to prepare for that? And the answer is yes. Yes, I do want high quality long-term care. So I'm going to share the questions I asked myself when I was deciding whether or not to get a long-term care policy for myself. Because if you are thinking about whether or not to get a long-term care insurance policy, these are questions that you might want to ask before you make that decision. And the first has to do with understanding the policy. Now, I didn't know much about how they worked until I had a relative and an acquaintance actually go to use their long-term care policy, and I just kind of thought it covered your long-term care, kind of like if you have house insurance, they cover after the deductible whatever you need to restore health, but that's not exactly how it works. So the first thing you want to do is make sure you understand the policy when you start looking at policies. And I don't sell insurance and I'm not a financial advisor. These are just the questions that help me decide whether that was the right decision for me, whether to get a long-term care insurance policy. And one thing to think about is to understand exactly when you can make a claim, because it's not just, oh, I think I could use some help now. You have to meet certain criteria, and a common criteria is that you have loss of independence in 2 out of 5 activities of daily living. And commonly those activities of daily living that are considered are whether you can use the toilet yourself, whether you can move yourself around space, get in and out of bed by yourself, whether you can shower and do other hygiene tasks yourself, whether you can dress yourself, and whether you can feed yourself. And that whether you can feed yourself isn't like whether you can cook your meal, it's just whether you can actually lift the spoon and put the food in your mouth. So find out how many activities of daily living you would have to no longer be able to do for yourself before you can even make a claim on your policy. And then you need to find out what is the monthly benefit. So with long-term care insurance, it's not the benefit is whatever it actually costs for you to stay in a facility or to have in-home help. The benefit is predetermined, and you'll want to know exactly what that amount is per month. You'll also want to know what the lifetime benefit is. So those monthly benefits end at different times depending on your policy. So it might be they end after 4 years and 190,000, or it might be longer and less money. So you just want to do the math and figure out how many years will the policy cover and when does it stop paying. Because while you can research the average stay in long-term care, we're not statistics as individuals. And if you were to develop something like Parkinson's, for example, where you might live quite a long time without being able to do these activities of living as the disease progresses, you'll want to be able to get good quality care. Another question to ask when you're looking at different policies is there an inflation adjustment? So if when you buy the policy when you're 60, that you might not use till you're 85, is the amount you're going to get per month the same 25 years from now, or does it increase with time, the payout of that? Because certainly long-term care goes up in price every year. I know one I'm familiar with locally went up 7% just last year. All right, a major factor for me when deciding whether I wanted to get a policy, because once you have the policy, you start making payments immediately every month, and whether that's a good value or not will depend on how much that monthly payment is. So we're going to do some math here. Now, when I was trying to find out about long-term care insurance policies, I called a lot of people and went on websites, and once you do, you'll just get dozens and dozens of phone calls, people trying to sell you long-term care insurance. At least that was my experience. And you kind of have to talk to actual people before you find out what the policy is going to be, because there's a lot of factors like your health. But I have some information here on what the average is. And one thing to note is there is that pink tax on women, because women tend to live longer. So women can expect to pay anywhere from $135 more a month if they start the policy at 55 to as much as $178 more a month if they started the policy at 65. Another area of question is to know your local market. Where do you live? Is there just one option for long-term care in the small town you're in, or would you actually have to move? Or are there dozens of long-term care facilities in your area? Because that will be a factor on whether it's a good idea to get an insurance policy. What is the cost of the assisted living and memory care in your area? Memory care is going to be much more expensive than just general assisted living. So you'll want to find out the different costs for each of those, and then compare that to what the policy will pay out. So let's say an average cost for memory care in your area is $8,000 minimum and going up depending on how much care you need. But the policy only pays out, $2,500, $3,500, $4,000 a month. You still have to come up with the rest of the money. So those are two factors you're going to want to compare: how much it costs in your area and how much the long-term care insurance pays out in your area, and how close are those, and how are the rest of your finances that you could afford to pay the difference. Because if you couldn't afford to pay the difference, then there's no point in having the policy, because you still want to have access to that care. Take a good look at whether there are ample Medicaid beds in your area, because eventually, if you have a prolonged situation where you need care, for 10 years or more, it can really drain all of your funds. And again, I'm not an expert. This is just questions to ask when you're doing your own research. But once you run out of money, then Medicaid can kick in, and you'll want to know the details about getting a bed and maybe be looking at assisted living facilities in your area, how many Medicaid beds there are. And you'll want to see if these are high quality beds, because I know I hear from a lot of people that, well, I'm not going to get a long-term care insurance policy because, Medicaid will take care of me. But of course, that's after depletion of a lot of your assets And what are those beds looking like? That can vary so much. They might be, top-notch facilities that have those beds and really great, or they might not be somewhere where you would want your future self to be living. So take a look in advance if you're considering whether to buy a long-term care policy, because that might be a factor. All right, so now I'm going to tell you how I made my decision on whether to buy a long-term care policy, and what my decision is. All right, so when I was doing research, I learned that I could get a monthly premium at age 55 for about $308. And let's say that I needed care at age 80, then I would have spent $92,500 on insurance premiums. So naturally, I would want the payout of the policy to be more than $92,500, or I could have just saved all that money between 55 and 80, right? So I did some math about what would happen if I invested $308 a month for 25 years instead. And lately, when I'm doing these kind of financial calculations, I just like to use AI. So I just went into ChatGPT and asked this question: if I can invest $308 per month for 25 years at 10%, how much will I have? Okay, and that would be $367,758.40. So that's quite a bit more than the $96,000 payout that I would have gotten in that example long-term care policy. So this is the kind of math that I did to figure out whether I want to buy a policy or not. Now, 10% is a stock market average that's common to use for long-term investing. But if that's not conservative enough for you, then just go ahead and put in different amounts. Let's do 5%. Okay, so if I invested $308 per month instead of buying a long-term care insurance policy, and I did that for 25 years at just a 5% return, then I would still have about $256,458. So again, a lot better return than the policy I was looking at. The policies vary a lot, so you'll want to look at the policy you're considering buying and the questions that I mentioned to ask about the policy, and then run this calculation with some real numbers, actual policies that you're considering, and see whether this is a good idea for you to do to take care of your future self. Either way, we'll want to take care of our future self. Just, do you want to do that by investing in a specific account for your long-term care, or just adding to your wealth in general that amount? Or do you want to buy a long-term care insurance policy? All right, I hope that was helpful. And let me know in the comments whether you have bought a policy or you are thinking about a policy, and if there are any other factors that I didn't mention in this video that could be helpful to the people reading comments. All right, here's a video that I think you'll like, and here's a video that YouTube thinks you'll like. Take care.